two, one. I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part. Nobody else did the awkward laugh. Okay, I am your host, Ian Taylor, and welcome to the 106th episode of Thursdays with Moire. Is 106 or no? I guess it is 106.
Wow.
That is crazy. This episode titled Space Force, we're going from actual wars to sci-fi wars that may or may not have ties to real wars and real world issues. Real world issues, to be more precise.
Yeah. I just realized I could have called it Space Farce, and I missed the opportunity. Oh,
well. That's all right. If it was like parody movies, maybe that'd be more fitting, like Spaceballs.
Sequel.
Yeah, there you go. It's sequel material.
The quest for more podcast episodes.
Exactly. Yeah. We've got so much material.
This for all it's worth.
All right. We've got a few guests join us tonight. First off, of course, our brilliant co-host, musician, artist, and whatnot, Devin King. Our buddy from Nova Scotia, Aaron Kramers. Heavy metal musician and performance artist and pro society clown, Nathan Shapiro, not to be mistaken for Ben Shapiro. And last but not least, join us once again, our amazing filmmaker friend from the U.S., Stephen Beason. How are you guys all doing tonight?
Oh, man. Happy to be here.
Great.
Yeah.
I might tune in and out, but I am doing awesome. I have seen all these movies numerous of times, so chances are I'm going to have an opinion.
Well, everybody does. They're like assholes.
And that's we're all asshats here.
Yeah, people like to lick assholes.
Certainly says a lot about society. You know what's funny, and just really briefly, because I do have a little bit of an intro as we go into the three films tonight. It's kind of funny because last time we met, not last week, but last time we did this, we were talking about World War II, World War I films from the German perspective. We were looking at films that kind of, portrayed a side that maybe we as North Americans might not be privy to or might not have as much knowledge about. And what was funny was we kind of spent the episode going back and forth about the spectacle of war, and can a film truly be anti-war when it's the nature of cinema and the cinematic language to make things as big and as spectacular as possible? Can something be anti-war if the music swells and if there is this sort of hero's journey like storytelling demands? And at the end of the episode, I proposed we could do like Apocalypse Now. We could do something like Brian De Palma's Casualties of War, which is actually a true story about a Vietnamese or a U.S. Army unit in Vietnam, and this one man who stands against his superiors as they engage in these human atrocities against this young woman that's a prisoner of war. And I was like, that could be a really interesting angle to look at, like actual anti-war films. But we're going to be talking about Starship Troopers tonight.
Also an anti-war movie.
Well, we'll get into that.
Great segue. Holy shit.
Yeah, no.
That felt like a Norm Macdonald bit for a second almost.
I know, right? Yeah.
Just weaved it in there.
So we're
man, it reminds me of that tragedy.
I know. We're gonna, or so the Germans would have us believe. So we're gonna be talking about Starship Troopers. We're gonna be talking about Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. We're gonna be talking about District 9, and just really quickly, because I'm about to introduce the first movie of the night, Starship Troopers. I think it is worth just throwing this out there because we have talked about Paul Verhoeven before.
A goat.
He's a goat. We've talked about Total Recall. We've talked about Showgirls. And one thing that I brought up about Showgirls when we reviewed that was there was actually a documentary called You Don't Know Me, which is about the sort of cultural impact of this really trashy movie and, how it's affected people. And I was actually like kind of watching this and learning about like Paul Verhoeven, his like when Basic Instinct came out, there was a lot of like anti hate groups that were protesting Basic Instinct because it was supposedly problematic to portray the Sharon Stone character as the villain when she's also bisexual or presented that way. And sort of the irony that Showgirls has now been almost embraced by the drag community and has been kind of like reclaimed as this big performance thing. And there are actually like a lot of gay bars and drag queens and stuff that will do bits out of Showgirls, and it's kind of been embraced as this like LGBT kind of like campy masterpiece in a weird way.
Or a disaster piece, depending how you look at it.
Sure, exactly. But I will say, like, just briefly, I mean, there was a tragedy that just happened in a gay bar in Colorado. And I know we're kind of talking about fantasy, sort of sci-fi violence tonight, and it's all in good fun. But I do just want to say, our heart goes out to the victims. And I think it's important to talk about that also because, we're talking about kind of stuff that is alluding to real world violence in a fantastical sort of allegorical sense. And unfortunately, it's not just bugs and aliens, and it's a really unfortunate thing that happened this past week. And yeah, I think it bears repeating that it is a really senseless tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I know that's kind of a weird segue, but I think it deserves saying. Yeah.
Mm.
And we hope to make your lives better by listening to this podcast, as always, though. So,
Absolutely.
feeling a little downtrodden, maybe it's time to give some kids some rifles and head off to outer space because it's Starship Troopers time.
Get your
Stephen,
ass to Mars.
take it away.
Starship Troopers. Let's see here. Okay. Starship Troopers is a 1997 sci-fi action movie directed by Paul Verhoeven, also written by Ed Neumeier, who would actually go on to do the Starship Troopers sequels. This is based on the novel by Robert A. Heinlein, novel of the same name. It is a story about Johnny Rico, which is his real name, I swear to God. He is a young, hip, and happening guy in the 23rd century. He has a lot of perfectly conventionally attractive young friends. And they are serving in the military under this new world order to obtain their citizenship. So military service is completely mandatory. They are sent to exterminate these giant cockroach creatures. To kind of tie into my earlier point, actually, Neil Patrick Harris is one of the stars, playing Which I always find it funny how that, he's a very openly gay man, and yet he's always cast as this sort of
Ladies' man.
womanizer.
Well, I think that's why he always gets away with being a womanizer, because the women on set just know, like, okay, this is clearly an act.
Why does he keep getting away with it?
Well, that's how. We know the answer.
Also starring Casper Van Dyne, who was a daytime soap opera star, and Denise Richards of Tammy and the T-Rex.
Yay!
Yeah. So the film was actually not well received on release.
You don't say. What?
I think it was a moderate box office success, if that. But critics were very harsh on it. And one of the interesting things about this film is that it was derided for promoting fascism, which I think is kind of funny because I think the satire is pretty obvious in hindsight.
Absolutely.
Speaking of in hindsight and retrospective, Quentin Tarantino, Ari Aster, a number of famous Hollywood directors have actually come out and supported this film and kind of given it a renewed interest and kind of cult following. In the years since, it's kind of become this misunderstood cult film, like a lot of other Paul Verhoeven films around this time. Yeah, what do we think about this one?
So I saw this film. Oh, sorry, you go first, Evan.
No, you go ahead, Ian.
All right. I saw this film years ago. Like, I'm talking like I was like 12, 13 years old. Like, everybody in public school was talking about it. They were just like, oh my god, like Starship Troopers is like this really cool, funny movie. Like, you should watch it. It's got all these big bugs in it. And, of course, as a Godzilla fan, giant creatures getting shot at is something I had to see. But, like, as a kid, I was just like, this is really stupid. But, like, what people, like, nowadays say, like, oh, it's, like, this genius piece of satire. It's anti-militaristic. And I was thinking, like, based off of memory, I was like, yeah, sure. Sure it is. All right, guys. Like, let's not see that. But I must apologize because I must have been the biggest fucking idiot as a kid because the satire is so heavy-handed in this movie to the point where people quite literally are inches away from sig hailing if they tilt their hands a little bit to the left in the salooning scene.
or just look at how Neil Patrick Harris is, dressed.
Yep.
He's wearing fucking Hugo Boss, like, Nazi commandant.
All the soldiers are wearing, like, Nazi commandant outfits. And but I think the element that makes the satire work for me is that it feels like the director also knows it's not subtle. It feels like the director is very much in on the joke. Like, the silly propaganda segments
totally.
in particular were so funny. Like, it's like, of course, like the fake laughter scene in the opening, the scene where the guys are like, hey kids, you want to carry these live weapons with live ammunition? Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, you also have to remember that whole sequence that everybody talks about where it's like, I'm doing my part, that is pretty much shot for shot from Triumph of the Will.
Yeah, a lot of movies were inspired by Fairness, but
propaganda films, and it's completely taking the piss out of them and just making a mockery of it. So it's kind of funny how people watch this and didn't get that at the time.
Well, yeah, because it's so unsubtle. I think part of it is because we've seen so many satires and we've seen so many, like, they're like, film theory has brought like an eye to cinema that we kind of look at films in a different way. Like, we look at them in the sense of like, how are they taking apart this kind of culture? How are they influenced by that kind of culture? Like, I think that helps us see like the less subtle satire of the film. I think my biggest problem with Starship Troopers is that, like, when it isn't leaning on the satire, I think parts of it are legitimately kind of bad, personally. And it bugs me that people kind of blow it all off as satire, where I don't know if that's entirely true. I think the first half is way better than the second half. Like, as soon as it got to them shooting the bugs, ironically, that was probably the part where I was the most bored. Like, I love the propaganda. I love the guy, the amputee, being like, it's a great service. You're going to do a great job. I love all Clancy Brown chewing up the scenery. But as soon as it got to them shooting bugs, I'm like, is this still a joke? Like, I don't know. It just feels poorly put together at this point. Like, it kind of.
It's just like
I don't know if I like that second half.
Your movie can't be all message. You know, you got to have some fun in it. You know,
I'm not saying it can't be fun. I'm not saying it can't be fun. It's just that's not a good example of fun, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. I think it's got, you've got the satire, you've got the comedy of that satire, but then, you've got people blowing up bugs, and it's a good time.
I just found it kind of repetitive. Like, I think hive mind villains in general are just kind of boring to me, and it's kind of just a lazy excuse to be like, oh, if you destroy this part in their collective, every other part of the collective dies with it. That kind of feels like a way of the writers just going like, well, we don't have to write like any consequence for defeating these villains, and Starship Troopers handles it a little better than, say, Edge of Tomorrow, where it's just on the planet. It's not like galaxy-wide aliens go away. It's like on the planet, they all kind of crumble once they take the brain that they censored the probing of, but it doesn't quite fully cover it.
Here's the thing that I think you're maybe missing here, Ian. I think, aside from the propaganda, when you actually get to like the story beats of the sort of romance subplot, and all these characters are like together, and you have like a love square instead of a triangle.
I hated that so much.
They all get matching tattoos.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. That's so intentional. That's so on purpose, because they're
very much
like it's shot like a soap opera. It's shot like Beverly Hills 90210. And this is something that I want to bring up, is like, I have to respect the hell out of Paul Verhoeven, because how do you cast people that you're basically making fun of? These actors are not. Yeah. No, these actors are not great. They are cast because...
Hey, Clancy Brown, fuck you. Clancy Brown was fantastic.
Michael Ironside, come on.
I mean, Neil Patrick was pretty good. I actually think he was
always good.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Casper Van Dyne. I'm talking about like Denise Richards.
It's a weird day where Denise Richards gives a more convincing performance in Taming the T-Rex than this movie. I'm not even taking that back. I'm not even joking.
Here's the problem.
I don't think that it's bad on purpose, though. It feels incompetent.
No, it's not incompetent. That's the whole point.
I don't agree with that.
Stereotypically, conventionally attractive, boring, mostly white people. Like, that all ties into the satire.
Then
you're making fun of feminism.
No, 100%. They're like lit perfectly.
The Aryan like that whole master race thing that Hitler wanted. Like, that's the whole joke. I haven't seen a director who has cast people that are so empty and like dead behind the
But that's the actor's fault. I don't agree that's intentional.
No. That's the actor's fault.
It's very
on purpose.
Purposeful counting.
It's very purposeful.
It's very purposeful casting, yeah.
There's
some actors that give way better performances than others.
Well, Michael Ironside is a better actor. I mean,
that's true. Clancy Brown's a better actor.
Well, but those guys aren't cast for the, like, they're not cast the same way that your lead performances with like Casper Van Dyne and Denise Richards are. Like, they're cast because they're the actual talent. Like Dean Norris.
I'll have to agree to disagree on this one.
No, I think
gifts.
I mean, I think the sex gifts. I do think it's purposeful. I think another example of a film that kind of does the same thing, and it was very misinterpreted upon its release as well, was Southland Tales. You have like Sean William Scott.
Okay, hold on. We're not comparing this to Southland Tales. Okay, we're not.
Do it.
100%. Sean William Scott is like, he's basically known for being Stifler. You have The Rock. You have the chick who played
Michelle
Buffy.
Gellar.
It's well, that's all it is. It's like we're making fun of these people and making fun of the kind of vapid shallowness of society, and we're casting all these stereotypically attractive people who are not exactly the greatest actors, but that's the whole point. Like, I think
I know it isn't.
phenomenal.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I mean,
it feels like the director. I don't know. It feels like is that the case, or is that the case of the director being like, I can turn these actors into great actors. They're just miscast in their roles. I can give them these great performances. I mean, Richard Kelly said that in an interview, that he thought like the actors in his movie were genuinely misunderstood, and that they were pigeonholed into playing like the same roles over and over again. They wanted them to come out of their shell. Like, he openly admitted that in an interview, and it kind of feels like the same case with this. Feels like Paul Verhoeven's just like, oh yeah, like I'm a great director. I can get great performances out of these young actors that do not have much of a great track record. Except for Tammy the T-Rex, of course. Masterpiece material. I don't know if I agree with that side of it. That being said, despite my issues, I did enjoy it overall. The parts that were funny were hilarious, and
I mean, I think even like, you know, if we're putting, you know, that they're making fun of the whole, you know, like white Aryan whatever, with putting that aside, Paul Verhoeven is so undeniably campy across his films.
Absolutely.
And that kind of thing is intentional. And it's like, you know, like you see that in fucking RoboCop. You know, you see that in RoboCop.
I feel like that's part of like his origins as a filmmaker, but
exactly. And I think to deny that it isn't intentional camp in this one would be foolish.
Oh no, it is. It's just I'm not the biggest fan of camp all the time, I suppose.
I'm not either, but I think that Verhoeven in a lot of his films just does such a great job of balancing it. Because if something's all camp, like I hate Baz Luhrmann. I'm not a fan of Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah.
Baz Luhrmann's
The Great Gatsby could go fuck itself. I'm really not a fan of that adaptation.
Yeah, no, Baz Luhrmann's all camp. This is balanced, you know, as balanced as RoboCop or Total Recall is, you know.
Oh, Total Recall is his best movie. Yeah. I stand by that still. That was the thing too. Like Total Recall, I watched that movie and that is a masterpiece of special effects. Like the practical effects look incredible. And apparently there was CGI in it, but I didn't notice it, which for a 90s movie is mind-blowing. This film kind of looks like shit in comparison, in my opinion. And yes, I guess like it's supposed to look like a soap opera apparently, but not even in the visual effects, which we'll get to that in a bit. Just the way it's shot just felt, like you guys said, like bland and lifeless and flat, and like the lighting is never particularly. I do not agree that it's intentional. No, I'm sorry. I feel like that was a case of either like he didn't shoot in real.
That you're wrong.
I feel like it's a mix of like he didn't know how to shoot in real locations, because a lot of this is shot in real locations. He didn't know. In real locations, I mean not sets, because like RoboCop and Total Recall, that's all sets, like all the time, 100%.
Well, and I mean there is okay, like back up, because you're talking about you didn't notice the CGI in Total Recall.
I did. I honestly didn't notice it.
Where Arnold Schwarzenegger walks through the X-ray machine and you see his skeleton, like that is so campy and like nonsensical.
Honestly thought it looked good. I thought it looked better than any of the bug effects in this movie, if I'm being honest. But I don't blame any of the effects.
That is a real like early CG effect in Total Recall. Most of it's practical, but that is the one CG one. But yeah, the CGI, this definitely feels kind of dated in this compared to some other films that were out at the time. Well, Galaxy Quest came out just a few years after this, although I think it had maybe more of a budget in some sense. I'm not sure.
It definitely had more of a budget.
Well, hang on. Let me test that. Yeah. Galaxy Quest budget was $45 million. Starship Troopers budget $100 million.
Really?
Okay. Wow.
100 million, especially for the late 90s.
Well, it shows how much progress happened in just a few short years, because Galaxy Quest's CGI actually holds up beautifully.
Well, that's just it. I think I don't blame the effects artists. I blame the fact that the technology just wasn't quite there yet. If you compare this to, say, the first two Jurassic Park movies, I think Steven Spielberg knew deep down that like the visual effects were there, but they weren't quite the bee's knees yet. So he worked around that.
And Men in Black also came out just a few years later, which would be another great Budge, movie to do at some point.
God, I love Men in Black.
Oh, the first one's so good.
So this is my first time seeing this movie in its entirety. I remember wanting to see it when I was really, really young, because like the late 90s was all about bug movies in space. Like I was just on a kick of those, and I wanted to see this one, but I wasn't allowed to. Where I know other people, it's like their dads were like a huge fan of this film, and they showed it to their kids or whatever. And looking back, seeing this movie, I could tell how that influenced their personality, like these very militaristic type people. Which is it's ironic how the irony or the satire might have been lost on them to an extent. But yeah, watching this now, I'm gonna steal a line from RoboCop and say, "I like it."
I'd buy that for $1.
Good review.
Here's my thing, and I haven't even brought this up yet. So this is also the first time that I've seen it all the way through.
No way.
So here's my story. I was probably, 15, 16 years old, and this was one of those films that we have like a local, cable channel, like news channel, probably like Fox or whatever. And they do kind of their regularly scheduled programming, and 5 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, and then later, late at night, around like after the news, so probably 11, 12, whatever, they would try to like fill the runtime with either reruns of old like 90s shows or like old movies. And that was actually, that whole like nighttime block was how I experienced Seinfeld for the first time.
Nice.
Right. And so I remember a bunch of the movies that they would show late at night, and like this one was one that just stuck out to me. And I think at the time, with this like male gaze and teenage mindset, I was like, oh fuck yeah, they're shooting giant bugs and there's all these people in a shower, like hell yeah. The greatest movie ever.
That's why I saw it.
This is the perfect movie for when you're like 13 and just starting to get into puberty. This is like peak entertainment.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
it was amazing.
It reminds me of another show that I was introduced way too late. It was a friend of mine. There was a Canadian show called Lex, which is very much I don't know. Oh yeah, you started watching it, and like this is the perfect show to get into when you're like 13 years old. But anyway,
that was basically what this was. And then I watched it the other night, and now being like 27, I'm like, oh, this is what this was actually about.
Yeah, exactly.
it has layers. It's like onions. There's
Layers.
DNA, there's action, and there's great social political commentary.
Well, and I think I don't want to give the impression that this movie is perfect. I didn't love it, but I really liked it. It does have some flaws. I think I kind of put this in my review where it's like, it's more clever than people give it credit for.
Yep.
But I don't know if it's as clever as it thinks it is. And I don't think that it's as good as Total Recall. I don't think it's as good as RoboCop. I actually kind of somewhat prefer Showgirls because of what a disaster that movie.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, no. In terms of entertainment value, I agree.
Hold the fucking phone.
No, I'm being serious right now. That movie has a lot going for it.
Oh, it's. I mean, it's terrible, but it's so funny. Yeah.
Some of the right things. But no, I mean, I had fun with it. I
I
think
agree.
it's well deserving of its cult status. I had a couple of really good laughs. It's flawed, but like it's so hard to hate, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of lovable in a sense, but it's just like kind of going off what you said earlier, Nathan. Like I love movies that blend like action and cheese and satire together into one little bow. Like that's what we like about Total Recall so much. Like yeah, there's like satirical like elements to it, but it's also like this really goofy, dumb, fun action movie where you can see like Arnold Schwarzenegger say lines like. Is it the real me? It is. Before blowing somebody up, like I love stuff like that. My
That is one of my
problem
favorite
is that
Arnold lines of all
the
time.
the action in of itself in Starship Troopers is not that great to me. And I was more attached to the goofier elements and the satirical elements. If this movie was just a too many cooks style edit of all of the propaganda videos, then it would be the best short movie ever. I just needed when there was barely any of that in the second half, I was disappointed. Like maybe
Well,
that's why
I
I
think
was
I
so.
think those are definitely the most rewatched scenes of the movie are the propaganda bits. I mean, they're just
I don't
really
blame
fun
him.
and tongue in cheek to watch. But also there is one scene that I personally watched more than a few times, and that was a shower scene.
Oh, of course,
Um,
yeah.
Obvious.
I'm
For
not
research.
surprised at all.
Which is
No.
it wasn't just because of all the very fine nudity, but there was also some very interesting dialogue being said that
Oh.
you probably didn't hear the first time you watched it. But no, there's literally a whole article talking about this scene and how really it really kind of sets the stage of where they are as a society where basically there's a difference between being a citizen and a civilian. In order to gain full citizenship, you have to serve. That's also how you basically gain a license to reproduce and to vote and be involved in politics at all. And they're just casually talking about this while showering together. Um,
Yeah.
like it's like this is just mundane reality to them right now, right? And it's kind of
Mm.
kind of troubling. And
The way
you
that
you
I
probably didn't notice because of all the beautiful bodies as they're talking.
I mean that article is still
well,
really pretentious, but yeah,
I
Oh,
I
fuck
agree.
off!
No,
I'm
it
making a
is, but
point.
no, your point is valid. Their point wasn't. Your argument
I
You
is much
didn't?
think
better.
Did
to
you even read
me,
the damn thing?
I did read the damn thing, and it was the most elaborate excuse to tell his wife why he watched this shower scene for 20 times in a row.
No, I mean I was pausing through it anyway, but then I had more to think about when I actually dissected the dialogue. You know, like I said,
so
there's the layers to this thing.
well, you know what? I'm gonna back Devin up here because to me
Thank you.
I mean, it's
that
so
scene
unsubtle. No, I get the points they're
no
Well,
making.
while you're backing me up, can you pick up the soap, please?
Yeah.
no no
Sorry, go on. Please,
I,
please help defend me.
no I was just gonna say, I mean, to me, like, again, when I was a teenager, I was like, oh my god, there's a co-ed shower. And then now, like, watching it, I think it's a statement of, like, for us, I mean, I can't speak for everyone here, but I think for myself included, if you're in a scene, or if you're in an environment that is full of that many attractive naked people, that might be arousing, or sort of exciting. But here, the thing is not even so much what they're saying, but it's just the fact that they're so, like,
They're so
completely
desensitized to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just used to
desensitized
it.
to it.
Yeah.
They just don't care
Yeah.
because the only thing that excites them is extreme violence. Like,
Yeah,
and I think
because it's like I'd rather go there instead of work on a farm. It's like, oh,
well,
it's
and
good.
and here's the other thing. They kind of allude to that too earlier on, and I don't know if you guys caught this, but within, like, the opening couple of minutes, there's, like, the whole scene where, like, the boyfriend and girlfriend are kind of, like, passing notes back and forth, and there's, like, a little iPad drawing or whatever, like, animated, uh,
Oh
a
yeah.
90s version of a GIF, like, of them
Mm.
kissing or whatever. And then that's going on in the foreground. But if you're actually listening in the background, the teacher is like, Yeah, Hiroshima was actually good.
Oh yeah, these
Oh,
really fucked up points, and
wow.
they're just ignoring it. Yeah.
No,
Like, wait a minute.
they're talking about how the winners are the writers of history, and they're morally right, basically, the people that won
Yeah,
every
no, and this guy is
conflict,
making the
more or
whole
less.
case that like nuclear war is always justified because we're always the good guys, and it's like those
It's
are the
like
kind of things that you're
it's
missing.
raw, naked force that is the absolute decider of the course of history, something like that.
I have a weird compliment to make for the shower scene is that it was surprisingly tasteful for a Paul Verhoeven nudity scene. Like I was just like, hey, they're just like having a shower and talking and hanging out. I actually don't mind this nudity scene in of itself. But normally stuff like that can bug me a little bit.
His last film that he did was called Benedetta, and it's about two like lesbian nuns back when the church frowned on that.
It still doesn't.
I mean, well, but even more so back then. And there's like a whole. I mean, I think I can say this without spoiling anything, but there's a whole scene in that where it's like it's very much implied that one of the lesbians uses a crucifix as a
He's a dildo.
instrument of pleasure, shall we say? So,
Does she use a double-ended one?
I
Asking for research.
anyway, my point is, no, I kind of agree with you, Ian. Here it felt more purposeful.
Yeah, like they're just. It also kind of fits the world building. It's like, yeah, they're just hanging out, having a shower. They're, at military school, so they have.
The one woman's basically like the only way to become a politician is to serve, right? Like, yeah, and his parents really just want him to go to Harvard, like everybody else. That's the
standard
fucking like a low level.
Yeah, and he's framed as a moron and a wimp and a
and
baby.
oh yeah, even though like the scene that made me laugh the hardest was there was a very tragic accident during a live fire training sequence, which that in itself is great. He gets shot. I forgot the scene was in the movie. It's like, Mac! Mac! And then they're like, why aren't you not pay attention during your live fire training? I'm like, why was there live fire training?
Yeah.
I mean, I get the joke they're making. It's like the incompetence of militaristic leaders and how they mistreat the people they're training, and they aren't as safe and kosher as they probably should be if they're just rushing through to get them into the battlefield. But yeah, and of course the great the enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand with a knife. He's just like violently insulting. Like he breaks the arm of one lady. He's like, all right, medic. It's like, Pain is a great teacher. And she's just like, oh my god!
That whole scene reminded me of the fucking like Monty Python. Anyone ever see the Monty Python self-defense?
Yes. Oh my god.
Says, like I'm holding this banana, disarm me.
Yeah, they pulls out a gun and shoots.
And he fucking shoots.
It's like, why did you shoot him? It's like, he was coming at me. You saw it. Oh my god. Yeah, it's. Again, I think the first half is just way more compelling than the second half. It's just, I wanted more of the stuff in the first half. I guess the best way to put it.
I don't know. I mean, I
Which is funny because there's less action.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I had fun with it overall. I'm just.
I don't know. That's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not the biggest Verhoeven fan. Now, I will say this movie is way better than when I first watched it. I'll give it that. And I enjoyed watching it. I was never bored. Well, except for the second half. Like, I was bored in the second half, but I wasn't, like, tuning out, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, it wasn't, like, completely, like, make an end. You know?
I want to know what your... No, I want to know your guys' interpretation, opinion on the meaning of, like, the ending.
Christmas.
Where,
Ooh.
What's that? Yeah, just like, the meaning of the ending. So it's like, they bring out the brain bug, and they drag it out. And then Neil Patrick Harris goes up to telepathically communicate to it. And he just says gleefully, "It's afraid!" And everyone cheers.
Yeah!
Oh.
That's cool.
No, I think I think that's pretty straightforward what they're trying to say
Yeah.
there. I mean,
They have
it's
there's no empathy. There's no, like, Geneva Convention. There's, they're made to think. It's sort of similar to how America was after the 9/11 attacks. Like, I honestly
Oh
feel
yeah.
like this movie doesn't grow any less relevant with a lot of,
yeah.
with the geopolitical state now. Um, yeah, I mean, I just thought it was. I
no,
mean,
I mean,
it's kind of funny, but it's also scarily, like, relevant to how a lot of the nationalism
yeah.
that we experience to this day, at least in the U.S.
Also, the
No,
design
I
of that
mean,
creature is really cute.
I actually 100% agree with you, Nathan, and kind of, I mean, even like, people on Fox News or whatever nowadays, and it's like, oh, the gays are trying to convert your children or whatever, and then we have incidents like we had this last week. It's like, I think a lot of right wing, sort of far right wing fascist kind of ideology, it depends on this inherent fear of something we don't understand, or
Yeah.
the threat of losing a supposed privilege that, that underprivileged people are going to take from us.
Yeah.
And, and that's something that I really thought about too when I was watching it, is like, in a lot of ways this movie has aged, but also in a lot of ways it's like more relevant than ever, which is fucking scary.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you guys hit the nail on the head. Just the idea of like these awful creatures, and then it builds up to like this kind of innocent looking, like almost misunderstood creature, and it looks adorable, which I 100% was definitely intentional.
It's
totally.
adorable and gross at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's basically like this defenseless creature, and you can interpret that as like
Oh yeah.
nations convincing other nations to do what they want when they have them by the ropes, essentially. Like, they have no bargaining, they have no way to fight back, and they're essentially defenseless. And just have to
Well,
hope that these other factions treat them as nicely as possible. And of course, most of the time they don't, if history repeats itself. And that's where
well,
it kind of
also,
won me over. Like, I was kind of checked out by the second half, but when I got to that scene, I'm like, this is interesting. And then the movie was over. I was like, oh.
Well, and I think there's also a commentary there too at the ending, where it's like the people that were probably best for the leads, as far as like their love interest, those people are killed off pretty brutally,
Oh
and you're
yeah.
left with just like the most bland white bread kind of people, and their whole job is now to like procreate and bring on the next sort of era of foot soldiers. There's that whole thing where it's like they do the last like propaganda bit, and it's like Denise Richards has the little girl in her like spot, and now she's the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
I'm
And it's
doing
just
my
so,
part.
well, no, it's just like it's the cycle repeating itself. And I was actually kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about like the casting of this movie. I was reading that Denise Richards thought this was one of her best performances because it gave a role model to young little girls, and I was like, wait a minute.
whoa.
I don't know.
Oh, I mean,
Wait.
first off, her Tammy
Hold
the T-Rex
on.
performance was way better, and secondly, think
I
of
could
something
see,
there.
I could see look, I could see what she's saying, and like, though this is satire, it's still like a sci-fi action epic, and I get that, it's cool to have, a female, sci-fi war,
Well,
like,
they made
war heroes.
But get-
children's toys for this movie. Like, I don't think anyone knew how to market
Yeah,
this. I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that happens all the time, though. Like, they miss it.
It's like when they had children's toys of Breaking Bad.
It was like when Nope, like the no spoilers, but kind of the irony of that movie is to have like a park at Universal and to have like toys and all of this merchandise based around it is very ironic. No spoilers, but when you see the movie, you'll see like that. It completely misunderstands like the point that movie was trying to make. But that just always happens. Like when a movie makes money, and
I don't know if that movie actually makes its point as well as I hoped it would. But that's probably a discussion for another episode.
That's a discussion for another time. Right now, we need to do our part and give our final ratings for Starship Troopers.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 7.5. That's probably a little generous, but I don't know, man. I had fun with it. I think it has a lot of the right ideas. It knows how to execute most of them, and like I said, man, it's hard to hate. It's fun. It's goofy. Pretty smart. So I'm gonna give it 7.5.
SMRT. I mean, yes, MART.
Yeah. Obviously, you are not a smart fella, but a fart smeller. So,
what is the SMRT guy gonna give it?
I think you know its attitude. I'm gonna give it.
You know. Devin, please.
Come on, man, please.
What's your actual rating?
Do it.
9.6.
Wait, holy.
Yeah.
God. Wait, are you actually giving 9.6?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, Aaron gave it a 10 before he logged off, so.
Hello, base department.
What would you give it, Nathan?
It's anywhere between a 9.6 and a 6.9, just for the jokes.
All right.
Oh, yeah. The last time I watched it, I gave it a 10 out of 10 on Letterboxd, and just because it's like I love it. It's got like I'm just a huge Paul Verhoeven fan.
Yeah.
So, but I think like realistically, I would say like an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, sounds pretty reasonable.
That's fair.
Nice. Next up,
the movie gets extra points because the satire is lost on most of the fan base of the movie. Which is really entertaining in and of itself.
Yeah.
But take the satire away, and come on, it's still fun, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I'm giving. It's simultaneously better than I remembered, and not quite as good as I was hoping it would be. But I enjoyed it overall, so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Watch it for Clancy Brown.
Oh, give it at least a 6.9.
At least a 6.9. Come on.
Come on, what's not to love about this movie? Clancy Brown, Michael Ironside, I mean.
2 parts. Fine, I'll give it a 6.9, but very, very, very reluctantly on the record. Very reluctant.
Very nervous boner 6.9.
Yeah, just slightly itching. No, never mind. Next film is District 9, and I have a bit of a preamble with this because I have a bit of a history with this film.
Is District 9 next?
Yeah, because it came out in 2009. Figured we could do that next.
Damn, I thought.
Oh, we're going in chronological order.
We're in chronological order.
Yeah, we always do.
Okay.
No worries.
I just didn't realize that. No,
we'll just have to edge more for tomorrow.
Okay, so
I forgot it was not November.
So District 9, directed by Neil Blomkamp. As I mentioned, I have a bit of a history, and I am going to go in a pre-ramble, so I have to apologize. So, many years ago, when I was a wee lad, when I was a kid, I was about 10 or 11 years old at the time, my parents found out I had a sunken chest. And that essentially meant that like my rib cage was literally caving in where my heart is. And if it kept going on like that, the doctors would point out that would eventually like cave in so much I wouldn't be able to breathe. So they had to do something about that. And their idea was open heart surgery. And open heart surgery, so basically they were going to carve open my heart, put in a metal bar, expand my chest outwards so I'd be able to breathe properly. First surgery goes by, it was a success. I mean, it was an awful experience for me because, like, waking up in surgery and dealing with that is, like, it really affects your bodies in ways I can't even explain, and some of the stuff they had to do was not fun, but the results of it seemed like a success, so I didn't complain too much about it at the time. A couple years later, near the end of public school, I come back and find out that the metal bar was killing me. It nicked my heart. And my heart was quite literally bleeding out, so they had to do surgery ASAP and take out the metal bar. What happened was that they messed up. I woke up and they literally told me I was lucky to be alive. Because what happened was they pulled out the metal bar wrong, and it nicked my heart even further. So the scar on my chest was supposed to be about like the size of like 2 finger whips. It basically grew to the size of like the hand to the elbow. Like it was way bigger than it was supposed to be. I got scars on my side, and I basically found out that the doctor screwed up. And when my parents went to see the doctor about what happened, the lawyers basically politely told him to fuck off. But they didn't actually say that. But that was they did their lawyer way of telling them that nothing's gonna happen. Go away. And I was so angry at that. I was so angry at how they mistreated me, and that took years off my life. Like, I was so miserable. Like, I never said thank you for anything. I always chewed my mouth open because I just felt awful. It did things to my body I didn't even understand. I couldn't go out to the beach without a shirt on for years. Like, I had trouble breathing. I couldn't run properly for a while. And it took, like, 10, like, this is, like, about 10 or so years ago now, and I can still feel some side effects from that. But like I came home and I was feeling pretty miserable, but my dad was like, "You know what? Like I rented this pretty cool movie. You should check it out. I think it'll make you feel better." Come District 9. So I knew nothing about this film going in. Knew nothing about who was involved. Nothing about the plot. Absolutely nothing. I just saw the cover art, which is just the image of the no aliens, like the sign just covered up in bullets and just an empty desert-like background. I'm just like, this is fascinating. Like, what is this? This is really interesting. And at the time, like, the film just completely caught me off guard and blew me away. There's one element in particular. So the main character, played by the great Sharlto Copley, who's kind of an underrated character actor, in my opinion, really shines in this movie as Lucas. He has to deal with some freaking prawns. So he has to go out on his first day at the MNU to evict these aliens called prawns who came on their home planet. And he has to tell them, please go away. And he goes through a bit of a journey with that. He gets affected by this disease that causes him to turn into a prawn. And the element that I really related to as a kid was because I was going through changes with my own body that I wasn't understanding. I felt like these like government figures were mistreating me and my family. So the idea of the main character going through these changes and being exploited by these doctors and these medical professionals, like that really resonated with me. That was like I felt like I was watching a movie that understood what I was going through. And that was just unreal. Like that was just something special. I wasn't expecting that in a sci-fi film at all, let alone a sci-fi film in 2009, which, let's be honest, was not a great year for movies. And it just I built this special connection with this film. I thought Neil Blomkamp was going places, which he didn't, but that's a different discussion for later. And it was my favorite film growing up for a while. Watching it again, it's not as good. The villains are borderline terrible. It's kind of a white savior movie, but you know what? I still love it. It still has a special place in my heart, and there's still a lot I appreciate about it. But I want to know what you guys think about District 9.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna jump out here and I'm just gonna say I'm sorry you went through all that. I had no idea, and I do think there's something to be said for, you know, the time and place and the mindset that you first see a movie like that in. We kind of touched on that with Starship Troopers. The only thing that I'm gonna challenge you on before I actually get to my thoughts. 2009 had a couple of bangers. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, 2009 had the writer's strike, and there were a lot of movies that there were some absolute bangers for sure, but there were also a lot of movies. There was Inglourious
Bastards.
That's true. Inglourious Bastards was great.
Antichrist.
Hurt Locker, Avatar. Yeah, but like a lot of like major Hollywood releases were not great.
Okay, I mean.
It's considered. It's widely considered, I guess is the best way to put it, because of the writer's strike. A lot of movies
I
were
mean,
affected by that. Like Revenge of the Fallen was affected by it. Pandorum was really badly affected by it. Apparently, a lot of
yeah.
movies unfortunately lost to the writers' strike.
No, I definitely get that. I wonder if Public Enemies was affected by that, because
Yep.
that is probably
It was apparently
one of Michael Mann's worst films, if not his worst. And I
The
Black
one,
Cat's
yeah,
worst.
the one with Johnny Depp
and Christian Bale.
Yeah,
It's
and
okay.
it's fine.
it's
It's
not
alright.
good compared to other Mann stuff. I'll put
That's
it that
true.
way.
But
No, but so I watched this movie. This was one that totally flew under my radar, I guess. I really had no context for what it was. I mean, it's funny. My only real exposure to this film was I was dating a girl for 3 or 4 months, and she was not very well versed on films. And so I was trying to kind of like feel things out, because obviously, like, you need to be compatible, in a relationship. You need to have some shared interest, and I remember asking her, like, well, what do you think of, like, because I was kind of going through a lot of like classics. I was like, well, have you seen this, or would you like to see this, or like, and nothing really ever hit. And I was like, well, what do you think of scary movies? And she was like, I hate scary movies.
I need to see other people. No.
Well, yeah, no, literally, it didn't work out. Not for that, but but she actually said that part of the reason she hated scary movies was she saw this movie at a young age, and it just terrified her, and she didn't want to watch anything like scary ever again. And so, which, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, probably not gonna bring over a Bone Tomahawk or Martyrs, or it's one of those.
Yeah, Martyrs, perfect date movie. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Perfect
Probably
date movie. You should put Blue Velvet up there while you're at it. Or
Or
Antichrist.
better yet, watch
Inside.
Solo.
Yeah.
That'd be a great.
Solo.
mean-
You got Cannibal Holocaust. Great movies for date.
Yeah, no. I mean, you guys are making fun of me, but I'm serious. Like, you gotta. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, that's fair.
Um,
I watched like Mandy and like Annihilation with my last girlfriend. So
I watched Barbarian. I took the girl out on a date to see Barbarian. I didn't know what
Hey,
I
there
was
you
getting
go.
into.
I got stood up
But,
for that movie. There you go.
Oh, it was with your date. I'm kidding.
Jesus.
You dated Ian's
Brutal.
mom?
Smooth.
No. So I watched this movie, and not great, honestly.
All right.
I really had high hopes for it. I think this film has a lot of great ideas. I think my biggest issue is that I get the feeling that this movie kind of gives up on itself halfway through.
I don't know if it gives up on itself or if it's major studio interference, which it kind of feels like.
It really shifts though. It's got like the whole mockumentary thing going for it in the first half of it, and then
I wouldn't say it ditches it, but it does like lean away from that. I'd argue there's a purpose to why they do that, but I'll kind of get into that in a bit.
It's absolutely great in the first half anyway. And this is one thing that I will say about this film. This is by far the best film Neil Blomkamp has made.
I mean, that's not saying much, but yeah, it is.
Which
absolutely.
may not be saying much, but I have some fun stories about when I saw Elysium and Chappie for the first time.
Did anyone even see his last film, Demonic?
I heard it's awful.
He did another movie?
Yeah.
No.
And that currently has a 2.1 on Letterboxd.
I think he's on the same trajectory as Paul W.S. Anderson,
and
where he had
one
really decent movie. Well, yeah, could go either way.
Anderson has at least two. Like, at least maybe.
I mean, Mortal
two.
Kombat's Kino. Come on.
The new
Event
Mortal Kombat.
Horizon
No, the
is
original.
flawed, but it's pretty good. You gotta admit.
I do still need to see Event Horizon.
Think of it
And
as the
Horizon, I think
prequel.
you'll like it.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah,
like
I
it.
think it works as a prequel to Warhammer 40K, but we'll get into that when we review it
Later. But
We'll get into
Devin,
that. We'll get into this.
what'd you think of District 9?
I thought, well, for the first half for the documentary stuff, when it's kind of basically when it's just being an analog for the real world, that's when it's at its best. I do think it kind of loses something toward the last half. And like there are these things that Neil Blomkamp likes to focus on, and they become more apparent when you see his subsequent films, especially Chappie. How do I put this into words? Like, so this guy goes into these slums basically to evict all the aliens that have been living there for the last 20 years, because this is a ship that basically landed on Earth after I guess shit went down elsewhere, and they've basically become stranded here, and then they're basically treated like second-class citizens. So it's a very overt kind of social commentary on how we subjugate certain people in the slums and whatnot. Like it's a bit on the nose, but at least it's like well done for the most part. Like when it's in the documentary mode, I feel like that's where it's at its best, and that's where the
Oh, absolutely.
social commentary is actually holds up as relevant. And you have this guy that isn't a very stand-up person. What was his name again? I'm just
Lucas. Lucas. That's his name.
Lucas,
Lucas.
right?
Yeah.
Lucas. Anyway, so he's kind of this well-meaning but kind of pushing these papers, which are basically turning them over into a concentration camp, and you just see the dehumanization, the very little dehumanization of the way they're treating these creatures, who really don't deserve what they're getting, and then he kind of gets immersed into their world when he accidentally sprays himself with this genetic kind of material, and suddenly he starts to understand, their whole kind of perspective more or less. But he's still not a very likable character throughout most of the film. I mean, he
Well,
kind of does he kind of does redeeming things toward the end, and he has some things, but then he like hits him with like a gun or something at one
that's
point
because
and
he
knocks
said like he couldn't take him home in time, which basically meant like he was going to be
True.
a prawn
But
forever.
then even after that betrayal, and even after he like takes the ship and it gets like exploded, like the Christopher the alien still helps him anyway. Like I would leave his ass to die if he did that to me.
Well,
He
that's what
also,
I liked about
he
it.
hits him in the head with a shovel,
Shovel,
which
that was it.
pretty dick move, I'm gonna say.
Well, it's a thing.
it was-
Well, he's
it-
gonna
it
be
was
a
absolutely
prawn
dick
for the
move.
rest of his life. Like I feel like it's not that I condone the decision, but it was clearly like an emotional
so is
reaction.
Christopher.
Okay, and I'm glad we're getting
Christopher
into this.
already. Okay, go on.
We're getting into the ending here, and I just want to go.
The
ahead
ending's the
and
best
ask
part.
something.
Fuck you.
I don't know. Here's my question, because the whole crux of the ending, like the whole climatic sort of hook, is like, oh, you're gonna stay here, and I'll be back in 3 years. And
I'll be
it's like,
back in
oh,
3 years. It was kind of touching.
Yeah.
No,
what it
no,
was.
it's right, but it's like, oh man, you can't leave me here for 3 years, and then the ending is like, okay, I accept it, and it's like, I promise you, I'll be back in 3 years. Like, is there a reason that he couldn't just go with them to the planet?
Well,
Yeah,
no.
he was,
The reason he couldn't go with them was because he stayed behind to fight them off, and he could go with them. Wait, yeah, like there wasn't. I see. That is kind of a weird plot hole. I assume because there wasn't enough room, maybe, or something like that.
Plenty
Like,
of room. They showed the ship.
well, no.
They showed
Well, the
the
impression
sun.
I get is that the 3 years is they're not going to a place where there's medical beds. They're going to a place to rally up as many aliens as possible and bring them back. Like that's the
But
impression I'm
wouldn't it
getting. Like they
be-
aren't making
well-
a stop to. Like
Okay,
they aren't
but
like going to the medical bed and going right back. I think it's like the oppression.
I understand that, but wouldn't he be more safe among the people of that planet than on Earth, where they're trying to turn him into an experiment?
No. I don't think they would be, because they'd be like, oh, this guy's like a human turned into an alien. Like, if the humans are as awful as you say they are, why should we trust this fucking guy? You know, it's kind of weird, but
has
yeah.
Christopher is sort of his eyes into that world. I don't know. My thing is, this movie, like, I also read that this was originally going to be a Halo adaptation.
Yeah, Peter Jackson wanted to do that. Yeah.
Peter Jackson was working on the Halo thing. It didn't end up happening, so they picked up this guy Neil Blomkamp, who was working on a short film, and they wanted to keep the momentum going, and because they liked this idea for his short film that he was doing, so they decided to expand it to a feature film, and they kind of took the momentum from the Halo project into that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
They supposedly used a lot of the concepts and
A Life in Joburg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
I mean, I gotta say, when I read that, I was like, that kind of makes sense. This feels like it feels like a demo reel for a movie that wasn't made. Like, the first half was completely at odds with the last half.
Yeah. That's fair. I still think the second half is good, but it's not as good. I agree with that.
I don't know if it's that good.
I think it is. I think he did the best with what he had, and I kind of wonder if there was studio interference or it was just a case of I don't know where to go from here.
I think that, like, you know, if we're talking about the time this was released, if you're talking about the first half, you have an interesting allegory for, like, the American immigration process, and
it was also strictly related to how they were treating like different races in in Australia.
Well, but also, like, post 9/11 xenophobia. Like,
absolutely.
I remember thinking that was a huge part of the conversation, like around the time that this was made, and looking back on it, now, it seems like it was very much a part of what was going into this movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and it was all part of it was all part of the set design as well. Like, they were taking stuff from modern Johannesburg and this. Actually, I might be misquoting this, but I literally was just watching like a behind the scenes thing that they evicted this film there. So it's like it's ironic that was part of the film, that they also just did that in real life to film, although they had the help of some locals. Like,
well, and here's my thing, and I'm glad Nate brought this up, because this was a question.
How that's a bad thing.
This was a question I was going to bring up. Is, if you're going to tell this kind of allegory, and you're going to make this kind of statement about xenophobia and the refugee crisis and human sort of prejudice, is it irresponsible to then portray the other members of society as these murder-thirsty bugs?
Yeah, that's...
And the only reason that we decide to help them is because the protagonist gets, like, bug AIDS from them.
Yeah, like, it is kind of a white savior movie, but there is a counter argument I'd like to make against that. So, one argument I have for the mockumentary footage fading away in the second half, whether or not this was intentional, I guess that's up for debate, but the first half, the mockumentary bits are trying to manipulate the audience into a certain point of view. I remember we were talking about this film in film theory class. I think there's some truth behind this. The mockumentary elements are clearly trying to manipulate us to a certain point of view. Like, it's very, like, anti-prawn. They only, there's a segment where they ask people if they should go away, and it's clearly just a select handful of people. Very much like how the news will, like, select, like, a very select handful of people when they asked, like, 50 people, and they just took, like, 3 opinions and pretended like that was the majority. But as the film goes on and we see the true side of what's really happening, the mockumentary elements fade because we're finally seeing the truth of the story. The documentary can't manipulate us to a certain point of view anymore. We're finally seeing the true nature of what's really happening. And was that intentional or not, I don't know, but I think it's a very clever way of revealing that as the story goes along. And they try to do it at the end, but by then we know better. By then we understand what's really going on. We see that from a new point of view. As an audience member, we have no idea what to expect going into it, but seeing the end, we could kind of see like how that documentary footage has been tricking us to a certain point of view the entire time. Sorry, I know that was kind of pretentious, but that's kind of my argument. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
To what point of view was it tricking us to see?
It was trying to give us like a xenophobic point of view on the prawns and their situation, but as the movie goes along and we see like the true nature of what's really happening, like the camps aren't anything special. You shouldn't go to them, and of course the mistreatment of how the MNU treats their patients. Like we're finally seeing like the reality of the situation.
I'd honestly
the language of cinema.
I'd argue I think you've got it backwards, because the first hear me out, because the first 30 minutes of this is very like documentarian.
Yep.
And it's like, that kind of like cinema verite kind of thing, where it's like you have a bunch of people kind of sugarcoating the situation.
Yep.
And being like, oh, it's really bad what's happening to them, but it's just the way it is. And you have these people who are like, well, actually prawn is a slur. And it reminds me of the moment in the last movie that we watched, Starship Troopers, that we talked about, where it's like, I find the idea that a bug can think offensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was
like there's so much of that going on in the first 30 minutes, and then like the last half of it kind of just like, oh, they're sci-fi monsters, they're bugs. Like,
I don't agree with that at all. Like, I feel like it really fleshes out like the humanity of the prawns. Like, we see like how this kid is this like adorable, like naive, like creature that tries to see the good in everybody he meets. Like Christopher is not like this mindless beast. He's this intelligent being that can create all of this amazing technology and use, instead of like the way we see his flat in the first 30 minutes is it's trying to manipulate us into thinking, oh, this is just, they're making drugs, they're cooking up illegal recipes, they're stealing from people. But in the second half, we're exposed to the true nature behind that, where no, this is an intelligent being simply trying to go home for a noble cause. I don't know if I really agree that they're completely mindless in the second half. And they also tried to help Wilkes at the end of the movie when the admittedly bland bad guy like tries to kill him. Like they show, like I don't know. Like I don't know if I agree that they just turned to generic sci-fi monsters.
I think it leans into that a little bit.
I don't know.
I think this is kind of my problem, is like,
and of course we see like the mech, we see the weapons in action, where it's like at first like we thought like these are just generic weapons, but in fact like they're intelligently designed, and you have to be of the prawns in order to use them, and the mech is very like complex and engaging. When we thought like the prawns were like very stupid and had no idea how any of this technology worked, we're seeing like the true nature of what their potential can really be. That's kind of held back in this society.
I mean, what do you guys think?
Good point. Yeah, what do you guys think?
Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, Nathan, go ahead.
I'm gonna defer. I'm gonna defer to you. I'm gonna be honest. It has been a number of years since I've seen this film. So my memory of it isn't as fresh. But I'm speaking to what I do remember from when I did watch the film.
That's fair. I don't want to just shit on the movie, because I think there are genuinely good aspects we can agree on. Like one aspect I think we can agree on is the visual effects have held up so well. Like the CGI looks. Sorry, go on.
Well, but just like I didn't think that they were trying to demonize the prawns when I was first watching.
Oh no, the documentary was demonizing the prawns. Like that's what I meant.
Yeah, but I feel like the documentary was satirical enough to the point where we knew that the documentary was bullshit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like that's what they're going for.
I thought the documentary was demonizing the prawns, but the movie was demonizing the documentary to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. But Like I'm saying, like those elements fade as the story goes on. As we kinda see.
They certainly faded, and I remember being a little bit confused by it as I was watching it. Granted, I don't know if this movie would work if you had the film go one way or the other.
Yeah, that's true.
How would this movie how would this movie come off if it was if it was all documentary, or how would this movie come off if it was all sci-fi thriller? I think
I think they did a good blend between the two. Like they started with like that documentary language, and they went to some handheld cinematic stuff, and like visually it faded into that like very well, and I think it balanced that perspective pretty well. We get a good kind of flip going from the found footage to the more cinematic footage, and
Yeah.
I think it worked out pretty well in that regard. Like in terms
I
of like
think
the
this. Well,
go
and
ahead.
I don't want to shit on this movie either. I mean, I think there's a lot of cool ideas.
Absolutely.
Um,
The
I
CG
think,
in this movie looks so good, like to this day.
well, the world building is pretty damn decent. I really like the idea of it's biological weapons, so that you have to have genetic makeup to be able to fire the gun. And then, of course, that ties in later where it's like you have the body horror of him turning into one of these aliens. And so now the government is going to force him to be like a soldier.
Yep.
Like, I thought that stuff was kind of brilliant. I thought the idea that there's like propaganda put out that he had sex with one of the aliens. That was
Yeah.
brilliant.
That was
Like
brilliant,
I think there's so much.
I forgot about the alien
Oh,
sex.
I love the
Yeah.
joke the guy makes. It's just like, did you wear a condom, man? Like that.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of good ideas here. I don't know that by the end of it, it all came together in a way that was satisfying for me, at least.
It's a very well made movie on the technical
It
level,
is.
at the
It
very
was
least.
actually. I mean, we should just mention it was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
It did
Yeah.
not. It did not win, but it was nominated alongside Avatar, Inglorious Bastards, The Coens, A Serious Man.
Hurt Locker.
Wow.
Yeah, well, Hurt Locker won.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and the fact that this was even nominated, like I can't imagine, like Neil Blomkamp must have been like, shit. Like maybe that's why like his later films aren't that good, because maybe he just let the success of this movie get to his head. Unfortunately.
well,
Like he was just like, this movie was nominated for Best Picture. I can do so
I
great
feel
with
like-
other films.
I feel like sometimes, sometimes you only have one. Sometimes you really have I feel like every writer or director or filmmaker, they have something to say. Sometimes you really only got one thing to say, and maybe
Yeah.
this was just the one thing.
And
you had to fucking
Elysium-
say.
No, especially like Elysium, it's like the same exact kind of. It's not that the premise is the same, but like the physical setup is like, oh, there's this giant floating thing above a city, but instead of aliens that are crash landing here and it slums below, it's all the rich people are off in this spacecraft orbiting the Earth, and they're gonna try to leave all the poor people behind. It's the same kind of poor rich dichotomy with a literal floating, city or ship just above another city. So
I haven't
it's
seen
kinda-
Elysium, but from the
Don't watch
trailer,
it.
I can tell it's
Don't.
like it's the same.
It's basically District 9 without the cleverness or the wit to
Yeah.
it.
It's interesting, but I think it misses the mark of the messaging it could have had. And then Chappie was a real clusterfuck. I mean, it was fun, but I didn't even know who Die Antwoord were going in. So I didn't know why I should care about their characters, which really
Die
felt
Antwoord.
underwritten. But yeah, Die Antwoord, they're in the movie and they
They're
play
in the
basically.
movie.
They're in the movie and they play basically these versions of themselves, and I
That's
went in that
hilarious.
movie completely
Well,
blind.
I mean, we should. I mean, I'm not accusing the Academy of being biased. Never, of course. But
Obviously not. No.
but this movie was produced by Peter Jackson, who had just come off The Lord of the
Lord of
Rings
the
And
Rings,
King
yeah.
and
Kong.
King
Oh, yeah.
Kong too, which also got some Oscar attention. So I mean, I feel like that probably swayed voters a bit, because this
No,
movie
really?
opens with this whole movie opens with like Peter Jackson presents.
All of
It's
the
not.
posters came with Peter Jackson.
Oh.
I thought he directed it for the
Well,
longest time. Then I realized
that's
it was
because
someone else.
no one knew who Neil Blomkamp was, so you have to have the more recognizable name up front.
That's true.
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah.
hey, if it allows a movie like this to be produced by a big studio and released in big theaters, all the more power to it. Like, if that's what it takes to get this movie out there, sometimes that's what you need. Brad Pitt
Yeah.
produced
Oh,
like
it's
tons of like
always-
indie films that like wouldn't get attention otherwise. And of course, like Elijah Wood producing tons of films like Mandy or anything along those lines. Like sometimes you just need a big name attached to get out.
I wouldn't count Elijah Wood. I mean, Panos Cosmatos. Come on, his father did Tombstone.
George.
Right?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
do most people
like-
know that, or do more people know Elijah Wood?
I don't feel like Elijah Wood's name was really brandished at all
Yeah.
in the market.
No,
I wasn't sure if it was or not.
I feel like
It was
even
an
if people
afterthought for me.
No, even if people don't know who George P. Cosmatos is on like a first name basis, like it's still about the connections. That
Well,
his father
also
had.
like Nicolas
Nick,
Cage
yeah, he-
was pretty
yeah.
sure. I'm pretty sure it was Nicolas Cage who was the big name attached to get this,
Yeah,
to get
that's
that
fair.
movie
Oh, yeah.
rolling.
That's fair.
And
But my
rightfully
point is,
so-
like, you just
rightfully
sometimes
so,
need a
I
big
I
name
think a more
attached.
like I think a more apt comparison would be kind of like we talked about how Mel Brooks put the money for The Fly
Yeah,
for David Cronenberg, or
That's
put
true.
the money for The Elephant Man for David
Fly.
Lynch.
that's true.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just need a big name attached, and if that helps the
Sure.
film get more attention, so be it. Sometimes
Yeah.
you just
Well,
need a kick in the pants.
So
Yeah.
funny thing I'll say about The Fly. Finished for a second, but just there's a funny connection between this movie and The Fly for me.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's some references to it, like the nail biting. The scene where he like clips the nail, like he loses the nails. Like thanks, I need to see that.
forgot how that stuff is still like cringe. I physically cringe watching that stuff still, which I was surprised that I was still very sensitive to that. I mean, but then there's The Fly.
Yeah, and
But
this film is
it-
very
it's-
cool too. Yeah.
the body horror element to this is very on point. I will say that.
Absolutely. Like the cast was probably the most disturbing part because like you're just dreading, like something's going on. You're dreading what's in there, and he slowly like unravels it in a realistic way. And then like you see like some scales at first, and then like the hand like slowly pops out. Like that was so well done. Like that was my favorite.
Yeah.
kind of body horror movie.
I'm gonna say something like
Do it.
there's not a lot that like grosses me out or just like makes me twinge a little bit, but like transmutation is like things becoming other things. I don't know why, but I hate that shit so much.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
disturbing
it
concept.
absolutely it gets to the primordial nerve and fears like like forced evolution, or I don't know what it is. It's
Yeah.
the
Just
there's
like
something about the fear of change, but also just like your body kind of working against you. That's a terrifying thought. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's also really fascinating though. I don't know. I have a weird fascination with this kind of film.
me
Like,
too.
yes, they make me cringe and they make me wince, but I don't know. There was something about like seeing The Thing or Hellraiser that was deeply disturbing, but also really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
What would you
And if
guys
you wanna
give
hear-
this? Go on.
If you want to hear more of our thoughts on body horror, you should check out our episode Body Brain.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Hey,
think we
Greg,
enjoyed
about
it.
you got to sing the jingle with it. Oh, I
Oh,
guess you didn't
yeah.
grow up in Canada, but we had those
No,
body break
Break.
little like infomercial. It was one of those like infomercial ads. It was trying to teach people to be healthy and get off your ass and stop watching TV between your show.
Sure. But I mean,
Yeah.
you can find it on our Spotify and YouTube, and I am shamelessly promoting us on this very podcast. Anyway, yeah,
Ratings?
thoughts, ratings.
Oh, Aaron gave
Uh,
this a 9.5 before he clocked out. But what do you guys think?
He also gave Starship Troopers a 10/10.
He
Nice.
does love Paul Verhoeven.
I'm gonna give this an 8. I do think it's solid for what the film is. There is some character elements that I don't quite agree with or thought were enduring, which only become something of a trend in Neil Blomkamp's other films, where he really wants you to care about characters in the last minute that really maybe don't quite deserve it. Although I think it worked at its best here for the most part, and I thought the story worked out. I just feel like he's been trying to make the same kind of movie each time, or trying to get to this level again. He just hasn't quite cut it. I'm glad he isn't trying to revive the Alien franchise anymore.
Or
Oh,
RoboCop. God, yeah, he
man.
wanted to do RoboCop
Oh
at one
God.
point too. Yeah.
Which no one's ever gonna no one's ever gonna top the original RoboCop. That's another Paul Verhoeven we have to talk about, because I've got a fun story about how I first saw that film at too young of an age.
Yeah, I need to
So
watch
I
it again.
actually know a couple of films that would pair pretty well with RoboCop. I think we should
I'm sure you
discuss
do.
this. Yeah.
I'm gonna give this one an 8. Works for
Nice.
me.
My heart says an 8.5, but realistically, I'd also give it an 8. But there's still a lot I appreciate about it, and it still holds a very special place in my heart. Prawns
Would you say
remind me of
this
the
film is? Yeah. Would you say that this film is a better companion for your heart than that metal bar?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's not saying much, but yes, it is.
You'd rather they slot the DVD in the.
Just
Oh my God.
and then I just hear the Sony theme play like every time I wake up. No, like the Sony production studios.
It's like the VHS and Videodrome, but it's a little further up at the abdomen. It's just a DVD of District 9.
So that's why, like, oh my God. That's where the gun is. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut that one open again. I just couldn't resist.
Well, hold on. If you were like in a Tony Stark situation where you had to have a DVD as like as like your pacemaker or whatever, what DVD would you choose?
Grand Budapest Hotel, probably. I mean, I'm always in the mood for that movie, so I'll just keep it installed.
Well,
for me, it's either Stalker or 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I mean, Stalker actually has dialogue to it, but you can't understand the dialogue, so 2001 is probably better fit.
I love Stalker.
Still need to watch it.
Oh, that's another one we should review.
Absolutely.
District 9. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10.
Not even a 6.9.
I encourage you to bring that up to a 6.9.
Me too.
Very, very ironically and reluctantly giving this a 6.9.
Yay, we did it.
It has a lot of problems, and I'm surprised that it actually got the critical attention that it did. I feel like I love half of this movie, and I love the promise of the second half that didn't happen.
So basically, when I thought about Starship Troopers,
I almost thought you were going to say Prawn-miss. I don't know why.
But Stephen, if you didn't like this movie, his next films are progressively much, much, much worse. So do not watch them.
Well, I'm almost see. Here's the thing, and I love a lot of so bad it's good kind of
I
garbage.
wouldn't even recommend it for that, honestly.
Really?
No, it's just bad. Chappie is just bad. Elysium, maybe. But it honestly made me mad. But
I was gonna say, Ian, don't like underhype it too much. He's gonna come back and say Elysium's a misunderstood masterpiece.
Oh yeah, fair point. Yeah, you will love Elysium. Elysium is so good, man.
Oh, yeah.
Nathan, what would you give District 9 from memory?
I would say it's been a while, so I'm gonna err on the safe side and say like a 6.5, maybe 7 out of 10.
Nice. Well, we have one more film to talk about. We're edging to that tomorrow with Edge of Tomorrow. Take it away, Devin. And Nathan.
I wanna know now.
Yeah. So,
so Scientology poster boy Tom Cruise plays the hero of this Groundhog Day in space. Where he tries to mac on Emily Blunt by using the most effective weapon in the in the courting playbook. Go into war. Oh, and there's also like aliens and shit. So whatever.
War. Huh.
That's probably the
What
best
is
intro we've
good
ever had
for?
on this channel.
And Devin, I don't know how you can top that.
Yeah. There's also aliens and shit. That should be on a t-shirt.
That's a Letterboxd review.
It works.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Edge of Tomorrow. I fucking love this movie. I thought
Yeah!
it was great.
Hell yeah.
This movie rocks.
It fucking rocks. I had no idea what to expect. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, a lot of the world building and lore and stuff is kind of inconsistent. If I had to nitpick, there's a couple of like very specific little things that are just like they don't add up exactly to the rules that the film makes as far as its world building and logic. A lot of that is kind of nitpicky though, because as far as like a dumb, fun action movie, this is probably one of the best I've seen in years.
I wouldn't say it's dumb. It's just
I
intelligently.
wouldn't even say it's dumb fun. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's intelligently made fun with some minor plot holes, but in terms of the structure,
it has something that would be like that could be a very tired or very under and not well done gimmick, but it does it to such a clever level. It works really well.
Yeah,
and it's more than you would expect from the run-of-the-mill Tom Cruise movie.
Here's the thing: the marketing for this movie did not show did not show the gimmick at all. And on one hand, I can kind of understand what they're going for. They want it to be a surprise. They don't want the audience to know what they're getting into.
I thought that was clever too.
Yeah, but the problem is nobody watched it because everyone follows a generic action movie. Because without the gimmick, it kind of seems like a generic action movie.
Which is weird because it's just like, people don't see this because they think it's going to be a generic action movie. But then people go to see like a bunch of generic action movies,
Yeah, it was also released at a weird time, I think. I think it released the same week as the Transformers movie, if I'm not mistaken, which definitely didn't help.
It was a bit of a sleeper hit, but I do think I like films that seem like just another run-of-the-mill type of movie and end up being something, amazing or something unique. So I kind of like that.
Yeah,
everyone wrote off Upgrade, but Upgrade fucks.
Well, Upgrade is better than what you expect going in, and this is the same case.
I need to see that. That's been on my
radar. You should watch that,
dude. You'll love it.
But here's the thing: I wouldn't want the marketing any other way, because when I first saw this in theaters, I was basically kicking and screaming. I was like, I really don't want to see this. This looks boring. I don't like Tom Cruise. I didn't like him at the time. I love him now, but. I went into this movie, and the first time he died, I was like, wait, what? We're like 20 minutes into the movie. Wait, he's back? What even is this movie? What's happening? And I was just interested and engaged at that point. I wouldn't have that reaction if I knew what happened in the trailer.
He think that he Tom Cruise.
You think that he Tom Cruise? Yeah. And one thing I appreciate, I mentioned this with Top Gun Maverick, where Tom Cruise being a badass is fun and all, but in that movie I kind of appreciate him being like a little pathetic and guilt-ridden and kind of clouded with all these emotions of like getting old and leaving his friend, basically like getting over the death of his friend. It's kind of a similar case with this, where it's like, I'm really glad he plays this slimy, pathetic, cowardly guy who tries to like manipulate his way out of trouble at every turn and like get off combat as much as possible. That has to arc into like the Tom Cruise we know and love. Like, that was so refreshing, and that made me like look at the actor in a different light, because I wasn't watching Ethan Hunt in every other movie. I was watching Cusco with a gun.
It's a way to work against type and be his type at the same time.
It's a great character. I love that opening scene where he's with Brendan Gleeson, and he does this really terrible like blackmail where he essentially says, well, when the body bags do come home, what if they were to blame you in particular? I'd rather, not be in that beach tomorrow. I'm like, this is awful. Like, this is so bad and scummy, but I love it. I love that they go there with his character and make him seem irredeemable, but that makes his arc all more satisfying. but you also understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, so this is one thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and we've talked a little bit about kind of ripped from the headlines this episode, but like, there's this whole debate now, especially with Tarantino kind of doing the podcast circuit. He sort of made the case that Marvel movies don't create movie stars. That you don't pay to go see Chris Evans. You pay to go see Captain America, and kind of echoing the whole like theme park sort of argument that Scorsese made a couple of years ago. And one thing that I think is fascinating, and Anthony Mackie, there was like a resurfaced interview where he kind of shared the same sentiment about like, it used to be back in the day, like you would go see the Stallone movie or the Schwarzenegger movie, or we're gonna go see like the action star movie, and that was your draw. And he was kind of complaining that nowadays it's like even himself is not a star. Like he's not a star. The Falcon is a star. And the thing that I really noticed about this film, I think Tom Cruise might be the last movie star. I think he might be the
action
only
star.
person.
Yeah, I agree.
No,
Well,
to an extent.
I don't.
To an extent.
I think he might be like the last good one, because I would argue that we do have like
The Rock.
an action star. Yeah, The Rock. And
yeah.
Well,
I fucking hate The Rock.
Yep.
I'm not even counting The Rock. I'm talking about, because no, I don't even think I would count The Rock, because Black Adam did shit at the box office.
Good.
No, it made a success.
But that's my point. It's like people, like I'm talking about who is someone that people go to the movie theater just based on their charisma and like what they bring as an actor and their sort of name. And I think Tom Cruise might be it.
That's the only reason The Mummy 2017 made any money. Like, if he had any other star in it, that movie would not.
Now, you could make a case for like Keanu Reeves. You could make a case for Nicolas Cage. But those guys have also been kind of like memed. Like, they've kind of been absorbed into internet culture. And for good reason. Like, and it's all been very wholesome and based, as the kids say. But but Tom Cruise is one of those people that, like, he might be the last one that people go to see for like raw talent.
In terms of action, I agree.
Yeah,
for sure.
No,
and I think part of that is like he gives 110% in every movie he's in, at least in terms of stunts.
He's fantastic in this.
Yeah,
like,
he is. Yeah, this is one of my favorite performances of him. Like I said, like that cowardly character that arcs into this like absolute like badass that doesn't even like demand respect by the end of the movie. He just like knows he's earned it. And also the fact that like he pushed so many practical elements in this film. The suits were originally going to be CG. He basically refused to do the movie until the suits were practical. So we can thank him for that. He convinced Emily Blunt to do her actual driving in the scene where she's driving with the alien in the back of the car and driving on the side of the road. That's not fake driving. That's actually her driving on like the side of the road. They specifically went to like a road in the country that was empty, that barely had any traffic and barely anybody in particular. And they just had her drive to the point where she almost killed Tom Cruise because she made like a bad turn somewhere. But Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise just laughed it off. I really respect that he not only pushes the filmmakers to do better, he pushes the other actors to do better. Like, the actors who work with him always say, like, he has an infectious charisma that brings out the best in them. And I really respect that about him, at least his newer movies.
Emily Blunt, I saw her interviewed, and she brought up that, it's often intimidating to be, like, a woman and kind of going on to an action movie and the idea that it might be, like, a boys' club. But, she brought up that this was one of the films that she did where she always felt like safe and comfortable and always felt like she was being around people and working creatively with people that really respected what she had to say, and you can tell that, I mean, this is a collaborative effort, and it's a bunch of people bringing their absolute best to the table.
Yeah,
Mm.
and part of that's because like all of the actors involved in the military group actually did military training. On top of that,
Yeah.
like foreshadowing Top Gun Maverick, but not quite as intense as that. But there's a funny
Yeah.
little bit where they were like doing a jogging exercise, and at the end they all went on a race. And one guy in an interview was like, "So we're all like 21-year-old, 18-year-old, young, fit people. Tom Cruise is like 50 years old, and he beat everybody in the race, and everybody." Because they did a bet, like, okay, we're gonna kick your ass, Tom. Like, we're gonna beat you at the race, and they all owed him like 50 push-ups, like in the movie.
Oh man!
But talk about the actual movie, like it's just, like you said, it's so fun. It's so incredibly well paced. Like I'm not bored at any point in this movie. And one aspect I appreciated in particular watching this again was just how much it leads to the imagination. Like there are certain, like the idea of like we don't know how many times Emily Blunt watched her previous boyfriend die. We don't know how many times Tom Cruise watched Emily Blunt die at the house. Like we don't know how many times.
Well, it's like we don't know how because like at the in the first half of the movie when Tom Cruise starts basically living every day and he gets his ass kicked and basically dunked on a fair amount of times. But we see his learning curve. So you have to wonder, just like, oh, what was Emily Blunt's learning curve like? It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it leaves a lot to the imagination, which for like a big budget sci-fi action movie is really respectable, because there's this aspect that people say about like a lot of expensive movies, but expensive games as well, is the fact that they put so much money into them, is that there can't be, to the point where so many studios are too scared to leave any stone unturned and too scared to leave like any part of it of course, like not for the audience to see. Like they want to put their money where their mouth is. So films like this, or like From Software games or anything along those lines, leave just enough to the imagination, leave just enough details that the audience doesn't necessarily have to see, but it makes it all the more appreciated that they're there, just hidden beneath the surface.
Well,
I really respect that.
No, and I gotta be honest, I mean, the plot is extremely clever. All of the performances here are great.
Bill motherfucking Paxton.
Bill Paxton,
my God.
I was just gonna say,
so fun.
Phenomenal in this.
There's hope for you yet, Private. Hope for you and the great redeemer.
Fiery crucible.
I am so happy that I'll be running into combat with y'all tomorrow. Tip of the spear, edge of the knife. Crack.
Yeah. No, he's
I was going to say
phenomenal.
there were two things I wanted to mention. Like, one was, rest in peace, Bill Passion. He was excellent in this.
Yeah.
Oh,
and also, arguably, this film is one of the only ones that very organically integrates like a very common video game mechanic into a plot.
Yeah.
Not making not that it was intention, but like just the whole concept of respawning is something you only see in video games, and this is one of the only films that actually integrates that into like the plot of the film. Maybe not quite intentionally, but it just works organically in the story.
I mean, there have been movies, I think, that have tried something like that. I think maybe Gerard Butler in Gamer.
Oh my God!
Fuck that movie. You want a movie written about gamers, written by people that clearly aren't gamers? Watch Gamer.
Yeah. What a movie that was. Terry Crews was in that fucking thing, for God's sake.
I feel bad, man.
There was a lot of wasted talent in that.
Keith David was in it, man. Come on.
Michael C. Hall was in that fucking thing.
And he did a dance. Like, what the fuck? That movie's
Zoe Bell, man.
Let's talk about a good movie. Not just the performances, but like the action looks fantastic. Like it's very well shot. The editing is surprisingly not shit for like a modern sci-fi action movie.
The cinematography is gorgeous, and I was really impressed that this movie came out, 5+ years ago now, and the CGI
8 years ago.
8 years ago. The
8 years
CGI
ago.
doesn't look like it's aged today.
Well, part of that's because so much of it was practical that they could make the CGI look better as a result. Like when they were on the beach, like yeah, sure, there's planes going off and elements of the mech suits that are CGI, but there are still like hundreds of extras walking on the beach. Not a set, an actual beach that was still rigged with explosives, rigged with like fire mechanic. I forget what you call it, but there's a name for the device you use for that. Like all of
Flamethrower.
that is practical. Like it's a perfect mix. Yeah, flamethrowers and vehicles driving by, like land vehicles. There's still enough of it that's practical that it allows the CGI that is there to look even better. I think that's a good way of doing that. So the CGI artists aren't overworked and they have a frame of reference. It's like, okay, like the scene where the helicopter's crashing in the house, like most of that is practical. Like they actually got like a half of a helicopter crashing through a building and spinning around. And Tom Cruise, being Tom Cruise, does his own stunts in that scene. So they get a reference. It's like, okay, so the alien should go here. The alien can't hit Tom Cruise, who's in like this corner of the room. Like it's very important. Like I know I push practical effects all the time, but I think it is important to even aid like the CGI artists to give them a frame of reference. That frame of reference is so crucial to adding believability to the effects.
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
I mean, the score is phenomenal. The cinematography is gorgeous. The performances are fantastic.
Surprisingly so, yeah.
Yeah.
And even when they are a little bit over the top, it's like, you know what? I can't even be mad. Like it's just too much fun. Like Bill Paxton is enjoying the role way too much, but it's
Bill
infectious.
Paxton knows exactly what.
Yeah, and even like the other soldiers, like yeah, they're a little goofy, but like they're still lovable and charming. I love Kimmel. You fight balls out, literally. It's like, oh, for Christ's sakes, Kimmel. It's like I gotta live free, man. And he like lives in the mech suit, just naked, and my dad is like, yeah, that's a guy that knows he's gonna die. That's guy knows he's not gonna survive. I'm watching this. Oh, it has its issues, but God,
No, I mean that's what I'm saying. Like most of
the plot armor and the third act's a bit ridiculous, I guess. But
well,
like...
I mean, if I really wanted to nitpick, I mean, there's a couple of things with like the world building of, why these creatures are, like why these creatures, and this was something I saw someone brought up in another review is like, if they can reset the day, yeah. If they can reset the day, why don't they just suicide one of their own to kind of get that reset ahead of Tom Cruise? Or is the reset that they do independent from Tom Cruise's reset? Because there's a lot of those little things where it's like if you really squint hard enough at this film, there's a couple of
like the mech suits aren't practical at all. Like the fact that they take so much to learn is like great for the character arcs in the movie, but from a practical perspective, like that would not fly in the military. There's a reason like they use M16s in the military is because it's not M16. Or is it? I'm trying to think. But like they're standard issue rifles that are easy to use. Emphasis on easy to use. Like I feel like mech suits in the real world wouldn't fly. Like they look cool. They're great for a character art, and you could argue it's kind of about like how militaristic leaders like fail to teach the soldiers they're thrown into battle, giving them the knowledge they need to learn. But it is like a low and practical.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. It's like I could sit here and nitpick and theoretically poke holes in this, but also it's so enjoyable and it's so well made.
And in a lot of aspects, it's still so intelligently designed that you're just like, I can allow it.
I went along for the ride and I loved it. No, I mean, I'm struggling to think of much bad to say. I think it sets out, and it accomplishes what it, is trying to do. I think it does it in spades, actually. I
mean, good shit. What'd you guys think of the ending? Because I feel like that's a bit of contention with some people, so I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
It took me a minute to realize that that the day had reset, but things were ending on a good note. because I had to go back because I thought it was supposed to be like nihilistic. I thought like he just literally
he's in the
started
loop
over
again.
again.
Yeah.
And then I like went back and I was like, oh, it changed, but he's still living the same day. Because there's something that alludes to the idea that the Omega is gone.
Yeah,
So
well, they
it-
say
Yeah.
like the enemies are like we're advancing in the beaches when they were struggling so much before, and she says like, "Did you hear the good news?" and stuff like the usual ramble they gave, and of course it's much earlier. It's the day before, I think. Like it's
Okay.
much earlier.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
and some people say like it's a happy ending they pulled out their ass, but I would counter argument and say it's actually very bittersweet because nobody, all of the relationships he's built, all of the friendships he's built, basically reset back to zero. Like nobody remembers what he did, nobody knows what he did, nobody knows
Yeah,
who he is,
but-
despite the fact that he
but-
knows everything about them.
But Emily Blunt kind of has a sense of what he did because he goes to where he's like, "You're not gonna believe," he's just like, "You're not gonna believe what."
Oh no, he
happened."
doesn't say anything. He just smiles.
Oh, he does.
He laughs. She's just like,
But-
dude, got stuff out of my face. It's just like, and then it cuts. I'm like,
he
yeah,
gives that
awesome.
sort of like cheesy grin, like
But it's
Yeah.
earned. It's just like
No,
it's
it
kind of
is.
cheesy,
That's
but it's
it.
like, you know what? Like you earned it, and of course, like the emotions he's going through is like, I'm just so happy you're alive when I watched you die. You know?
Did you
just-
guys
Yeah.
hear about the alternate ending that was originally planned?
no.
No.
Yes, I do. But please enlighten us.
So apparently they had a much bleaker ending in mind, which they decided to change, not last minute, but the much bleaker ending was when they were going to go to the last like battle scene, and the guy says, they probably have been through the scenario and saw us coming, and just then their ship gets shot down, and that's more or less the end of the movie.
Oh God.
That's so
wow.
unsatisfying. I think,
Well-
like, in terms of like a bleak nihilistic ending, I think like Steven's idea sounds better than that. Like, that's just unsatisfying. That's
Yeah,
just,
no,
like,
that doesn't work at all. Like
No.
I could see it where it's like he kind of laughs it off, like, well, shit, I got to start all over again. Like, but if the ship gets shot down, yeah, that's definitely worse, I think. No, I mean, like I said, I mean, yeah, there's a couple of nitpick kind of things, but I think I don't know, I had a blast with it, and especially like after watching District 9, this was kind of a breath of fresh air.
It's fittingly one of the most rewatchable action movies. Also,
yeah,
It is. No, it is. And I feel like it's one of those that if I rewatched it, I might pick up on things that I missed.
there's a lot of good
Uh,
attention to detail. Like, I particularly love the don't shoot him again. Just like the casual mention of like don't shoot him again, and of course the imagination. Like how many times has he talked to Brendan Gleeson? How many times does she just shoot him and he's killed himself out of frustration? Like it's so fun to think about the movie, and yeah, I guess there's plot holes if you go really deep, but the fact that it's as intelligently made as it is
Well,
still
and I
way
have
more than it
this-
deserves.
Which is funny to say it's like how intelligently made it is because it's not the first of its kind. There was
No,
Groundhog Day before it, which granted, such a different setting. but,
Very
like,
different genre too, in fairness.
I kind of want to talk
can
about.
you
like,
imagine Bill Murray in this?
oh my God.
We have Bill Murray instead of Bill Paxton. I think you could do it.
That,
I kind of want
Yeah.
to see how, how this guy stacks up, at least for you, against like other like Groundhog Day movies like this.
This is the
and
best
Happy-
one. I watched Groundhog
yeah.
Day. I think it's good. I don't think it's great. I think it's
Have
good.
you guys seen a
Happy
Russian
Death Day?
doll on
Oh no,
I
Netflix?
I have not.
I need to watch it. It's on my list.
The
Okay.
I haven't
first,
seen
I,
it.
I haven't seen the second season, but the first season is unironically one of the best things I've seen, especially on Netflix.
That's
Like
what
it's
I've heard.
phenomenal, and
Mm.
Natasha Lyonne she's incredible. She's so underrated. She is absolutely hilarious, and that is a really well made show that kind of does this same, obviously in a different setting and
Yeah, that's the trick, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're
Also,
using the gimmick for your own purposes.
There's also Donnie Darko, kinda.
Maybe not quite.
You could argue, I
Kinda.
suppose. Well, Palm Springs. Have you guys seen the movie Palm Springs with
I
J.K.
have not.
Simmons, Andy Samberg? That's a great movie, actually. That was one of my
Yeah.
favorites of 2020, and it's
I've
super
heard good things. Yeah.
It's very
I
funny,
feel
but
like,
also like very interesting philosophically too. I was pleasantly
I
surprised.
feel like maybe there's a future episode here. I know Groundhog's Day is literally coming up in February.
Oh,
It's
I know
Groundhog
that-
Day again.
Yeah,
and then we'll do this episode again.
exactly. We'll just review Edge
Yeah.
of Tomorrow again.
I'm good
and-
with it.
Yeah.
Edge of Tomorrow, Groundhog Day, and Happy Death Day.
Yeah, Happy Death Day was
Ooh.
fun. That was a guilty pleasure.
I was
You can
surprised by
The sequel sucks
that was
ass.
actually-
The sequel was so
I-
bad.
I-
Yeah.
the sequel. Looked like it would have. Like, here's the thing. It's like I saw Happy Death Day at a free screening because I was like, oh, there's no way that I'll like pay to see this movie. But there was a free screening on campus, so I went to see it, and I was surprised by how much I liked it. And I was just like, oh, that was cool. I was actually very pleasantly surprised by that. And then when I heard that there was going to be a sequel, I'm like, oh, that's going to suck. I'm not seeing that. Like,
Don't-
I don't even, I don't
watch
care
it.
how much I, yeah, no, I don't even care how much I liked the first movie. I know that just like that movie shouldn't have a sequel. It was fine on its own,
It's like you catch lightning in a bottle. It's not going to happen again.
No.
Well,
But you know what?
there's also
This novel didn't work once. It's not going to work again.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw there's also a new movie out now, and I believe it went to Peacock streaming. But it's called Meet Cute, and it's
Okay.
a romance. It's a repeating day romance film with Pete Davidson. So
Ooh, 5.6 IMDb score. Good shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait. There's also there's also one with Adam Devine and Alexander Daddario. What the fuck's it called? The Night We Met or something?
There's been a lot of attempts, but only some of them work. I think the ones that work best just try to be good movies that happen to have a gimmick instead of movies that rely solely on the gimmick to be good.
Well,
There's a
that
clear
there was,
difference.
Isn't it
right?
romantic? Basically, a girl's like in a romantic comedy, and it's all very self-aware.
Oh yeah, that's not a loop movie. That's basically she's
Oh.
trapped in a movie. Like she's trapped.
No,
in
but
a
when
beach.
when I was watching, I'm like, why did I feel like I've seen this like 1,000 fucking times before?
Because it's
Twitch.
generic and cliche.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
just another like if we just admit that we're bad, nobody can blame us.
Wink,
When-
wink. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we first met is a repeating day movie with Adam Devine and Alexander Daddario, who she would be the only reason that I would ever watch this. 'Cause
I agree.
Yeah.
Edge
Wow.
of Tomorrow gets a 9 out of 10. I was good giving 8.5, but you only live once instead of over and over again. So you know what? It's a 9. Love it. It's great. It's underrated. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it.
9.6.
Ooh, very nice.
I'm gonna say 9 as well.
Whew.
I'm gonna put it to a 9.7.
Oh,
God
you
damn.
son of a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we liked an action movie this much since Mad Max Fury Road, and maybe Casino Royale. Like we all gave Mad Max Fury Road 10s on that episode.
It's funny. The first time I saw.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was disappointed I didn't get to be part of the Mad Max episode.
You still need to watch that. Please watch it if you haven't.
I may do that.
Do it.
In the downtime.
Wait, you haven't seen Fury Road?
No.
I missed it when it came out. Yeah, I know.
Dude, that
know.
is like.
Kino.
Which is funny because I was honestly like I wasn't a fan the first time I saw it. I was just like, it's okay. And then my roommates were like, "What do you mean it's just okay?" And I was just like, "It's okay." And they're like, "No, we're watching it." And then I watched it. I'm like, "What?" And I watched it again. I'm like, "What the fuck was I smoking? This movie's awesome."
That happened with me in the Suspiria remake. I watched it on theater, so it's like that kind of sucked. I watched it again at home.
Oh
I'm
my
like, this is
God,
a
no.
masterpiece. What the fuck? Why is this so good?
So they're playing the original Suspiria around here on Sunday, and Goblin is going to be there doing the score.
Holy shit! That's kind of cool.
I was gonna go because like tickets were originally $15, but some asshole just bought up all of them and is like reselling them
Oh,
for like.
fuck. I hate people who do that.
Word.
Come on. But yeah, if you're listening to this podcast and you do that, sell those tickets back. All right, come on, man. it's
No
Christmas
offense,
coming up
but-
soon.
Yeah,
Come on.
No,
Like, no,
offense, but burn in hell. I mean,
Yeah, no, they're
Or burn the
they're-
tickets. Yeah.
yeah,
That
no, they're
should
just
be-
like
I don't think that should be allowed.
It
what's
absolutely
the
should not be
maximum where
allowed.
tickets one should be able to sell? at
yeah,
once?
it should be illegal to.
They're clearly
do that
just
shit.
blinded by money because sometimes they pay a little extra money, I think, for those kind of bundles.
I don't
Yeah.
fucking know, but
Yeah,
like
I
they
don't
bought
know.
like they.
It's same
bought
with
up,
like
a
PS5s and next gen consoles. Like people, I feel like there's something going on behind
What
the
happened
scenes.
to like? What happened to buying something because you want it? You know,
But that's not allowed. You gotta make money in capitalist America. Speaking of capitalist America, thank you, capitalist Americans, for watching this anti-capitalist
I'm listening.
episode of Thursdays with Moire.
Yes, and you can catch us 2 weeks from now. Will be December the 8th. We'll be doing our first winter Christmas themed episode. Ian, would you like to tell us what we're going to be watching?
So the theme of the Christmas episode is chilling murder mysteries. We're talking about Sidney Lumet's adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express. We're talking about Christopher Nolan's Insomnia. And to top it all off, we've got room for one more. It's Tarantino's Hateful Eight, baby. All...
Sidney Lumet.
Sidney
You guys
Lumet.
put the weird
I keep...
emphasis on
Well, we're Canadian, right? French
That's
is in our
the French Canadian sensibility seeping through.
Also,
yeah.
on a side note, on December, December 3rd, December 3rd, I'm also going to be hosting a open-ended best of 2022, best and worst of 2022. Not the best and worst films of 2022, but I do have lists for that as well. But of the podcast, I'd like to share, like, if you guys are available, I'd like to stream, like, the best movies we talked about on the podcast, best movies we were introduced to, movies that got better on rewatch, movies that got worse. Just talking about the podcast this year in general, because
A year in review.
a year review is a good way of putting it. I had a blast doing the podcast this year, and yeah, we've been through a lot, and we're so happy that you guys were able to stick through it. And
that's
I'd
why-
like to share that with you guys, and I'll also be live streaming Muppet Family Christmas on YouTube, because why not? Giant Middle Figure to Disney.
extremely based.
Yeah,
That is pretty
Unfathomably,
based.
you
And
dropped
And of course, December 22nd, or at least around that time, Devin and I are going to squeeze in Avatar: The Way of Water. I'm also going to watch the Guardians Christmas special. And hopefully Stephen can squeeze in those movies too, because we're doing a poll discussion on the state of Disney, because they had a, shall we say, interesting year this year. We're going to see how the Guardians special and Avatar: The Way of Water hold up in that discussion.
Well, that's going to be Daryl's panel discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We may do something on the 15th. I may hold a poll for Christmas episodes.
Nice.
Or Christmas movies that you guys would like us to review. That's our user selected episode of the month. We have pretty much
You should not just vote for Hallmark movies.
Yeah, let's not do that
Oh
again. That was...
God!
We'll
You
have-
know, last year I watched like A Christmas Prince, which is like one of those like shitty like Hallmark
Oh,
Christmas
yeah.
movies.
Oh yeah.
I thought like, oh, why don't I subject myself to why don't I do like a deep dive of shitty holiday movies? So I watched Happiest Season and A Christmas Prince, and after just two of them, I was like, I can't do any more of this. Like,
Oh gosh.
Nathan,
Last year we did an experiment where I had us all watch a random Hallmark movie. It's like all of us would just go watch one. We don't tell each other what it is, and then we try to get together and talk about it as if we all saw the same movie.
fun.
Nathan, I want to ask you a question before we log
Yeah.
off. Sorry, hang on, I'm trying to think of it's like, Nathan, with your nose so bright, will you join our poll discussion later in December?
Oh, of course.
Yay!
I mean,
Should have
there
worked
was
better than
need
that.
for effort. But yeah, we've pretty much got something planned for all the weeks in December, with the exception of after the 22nd, we're going to take a much needed Christmas vacation. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me again. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, great episode. As
And
always.
is it first day yet? Have a great night, guys. Stay tuned for
Good night,
Conan,
and stay tuned for Conan O'Brien.
and do your